The next question is one you probably could have guessed might be coming, and it has to do with illegal immigration and Arizona's plans, or Arizona's law, which is currently put in place. This question will go first to Congressman Spratt. The Constitution of the United States unequivocally gives responsibility for controlling immigration to the national government in order to create one unified policy. That does not, however, necessarily mean that states don't have different issues they have to face. So what is your position on Arizona's law regarding illegal immigration, and what national plan would you suggest to replace it?
Well, first of all, federal supremacy has to apply to this. It's extremely important. Secondly, I voted for a law several times that will allow state and local enforcement personnel to address and deal with immigration violations. If the local government does take this upon itself, local police, state police, not federal FBI and immigration authorities, if they do it, I think their role should stop at the point of delivering the alleged immigrant to the federal government. Now, why is that? Number one, because it's federal law. Well, it's much more arcane than you can possibly imagine, a lot more complicated than the citation that Mick just read out. It's extremely complicated, and most state and local people don't deal with it daily, and therefore haven't mastered the subject matter. Secondly, the immigrants who are to be deported, and most should be if they're found here illegally, the immigrants who are to be deported need to have arrangements made with their country of origin. And that isn't done overnight. That's one of the reasons we have great need for detention centers to augment our efforts on the border. So if the federal government is going to handle the diplomatic chore of returning these people to their native land, it's got to be the federal government. We can't have 50 different states undertaking that kind of foreign relations with different countries. Now, what do we do about immigration? First of all, we've got to go to the borders. We need 400 to 500 miles of additional fencing. We need 400 to 500 miles of vehicle barriers. We need more border patrol, and we've increased the border patrol to about 15,000 on the way to 20,000. And we need more detention facilities. All of that. That comes down to more resources. Secondly, we need a database control system so that those who are here legally can be kept track of. When I lived in England some years ago, every 6 months I had to go to the police station and tell them where I was. Or my telephone notes where I lived. So at the very least, we need a system that can data bank everybody and keep track of where they are, because 40% of the illegal immigrants in this country came here legally and overstayed their visa. As for visas, well, before you get to visas, the one big piece in the puzzle that's got to be fixed is identification. Authentic, non-counterfeitable identification. We have passed in the Senate, in the House and Senate, and I voted for it, real ID. The states have responded, South Carolina included, saying we don't have the authority to tell us what to do. Well, the problem is we don't have any definitive documentation that is foolproof unless we develop something like real ID. And finally, we need a visa system that works for those who would be seeking visas to work in this country.
Thank you, Congressman.
The course of pass is what we've got now.
State Senator Mulvaney.
You asked a really interesting academic question, which is what happens on the federal supremacy issue when the federal government won't do its job. That's at the heart of the Arizona situation. It's really just an interesting academic and intellectual question. If the federal government is charged with the Constitution with doing something such as securing the borders, what do we do if they don't do it? That's what Arizona, I think, is facing. I support the Arizona law. I disagree with the congressman. There's your extra minute. In saying that it's too complicated. It's actually not. South Carolina, late in this session, introduced our own version of the bill. It's almost identical to the Arizona bill. It only runs about, what is it, Eric, 6 pages? My campaign manager wrote it and is the author in the House. I'm a co-sponsor in the Senate. It's not a complicated issue. It simply calls upon the state law, both in Arizona and here, mirror the federal law in how you're supposed to handle illegal immigration. As for a national plan, Step one would be to enforce the laws that are actually on the books. I can't tell you the number of times I get emails and phone calls from people saying, you know, there ought to be a law that does thus and such. And I said, ordinarily, there usually is a law already. We're just not enforcing it. And that's the case, certainly, with immigration. I heard what Mr. Spratt says about having more border patrol, more fence, more folks there to patrol the border. My question is, why haven't we done it yet? It's been almost 30 years since Ronald Reagan cut a deal with the Democrats in the mid-'80s. Mr. Spratt was there. They granted asylum in exchange for complete border security. I was 15 years old when that passed, and we're still waiting for it. So my question is, listen, you know, we can sit here, we can talk all day about what we need to do, but we all know what needs to be done, which is that we need to secure the border. My question is, why hasn't it been done yet?
I do think, in the interest of full disclosure here, I should admit that I spent half of last year as a Fulbright scholar in Hungary. My visa did not come through in time, and I was an illegal immigrant for about 2.5 weeks. So in full disclosure, you're looking at least a temporary illegal immigrant in front of you, and I apologize for that. Congressman Spratt, if you wish, a 1-minute rebuttal.
Quickly, I didn't say that immigration law, the Arizona law, is simple or complex. I don't know what it is. I haven't read it. I'm simply saying, in long experience, the federal immigration law is extremely arcane and complex. And it's something that state and local law enforcement officials do not have training in, do not have continual contact with. So it's something that is better handled by the federal government, particularly since these are federal laws.
Thank you, Congressman Spratt. This next question will go first to State Senator Mulvaney. State Senator Mulvaney, we have had a great deal of growth in the size of the federal deficit. It has a great impact on the value of the U.S. dollar and therefore our international trade. What is your position on the growth of the deficit and its potential impact on the value of the dollar?
Scott and I were talking before, about whether or not we fill up in 3 minutes. I mean, you know, sometimes he said, sometimes there's really good 5-second answers. What is my position on the federal deficit? I don't like it. So, that would be the short version of it. And the truth of the matter is that we all know it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We all know it's the single largest risk to our nation, probably in history. Our own internal inability to manage our own finances. I think if you go back and you read the Founding Fathers, many times they commented on the fact that the threats to the country would come from within, not from without. And I think that's probably where we have reached as a nation. We're talking now, you'll hear discussion later on probably about how much the debt service will be. There's estimates now that the debt service by 2020 may be as much as $900 billion a year. That's just the debt service. You simply cannot continue to function like that. The value of the dollar in the U.S. trade concerns me dramatically. I am worried about the dollar going through just cratering. I'm worried about the value of the dollar dissipating. That typically would happen, by the way, through hyperinflation. All of you who have saved money over the course of your lifetimes, you have a savings. The biggest thief in economics is inflation. I know that we're facing right now this razor's edge between deflation because of the slowdown, but there's always that threat in the background. With printing the massive amounts of money that we have printed in the last 3 years, there's that looming threat of hyperinflation. And it is perhaps, again, you combine the two things, and you set up a situation where I think the country is probably at its greatest risk, certainly in my lifetime.
Thank you.
I have spent a career of 28 years in the House fighting the deficit and trying to bring balance to the federal budget. In 1997, that culminated in a group called the Budget Group that we put together. Erskine Bowles was then in the White House with President Clinton. And for a period of 6 months, we negotiated and hammered out the first budget to balance in 30 years. And during the period after 1997, until George Bush came to office in 2001, we paid down $400 billion of national debt, outstanding debt of the federal government. So when I speak about being committed to it, it's like Casey Single said, you can look it up. I was there. I helped make it happen. I helped sell it on the House floor. Now things are in terrible shape now. But when President Bush came to office, we gave him a budget the year before was $236 billion in surplus, not deficit, but surplus. He insisted on doing several different things. Betting the budget, big tax cuts, betting the budget on a blue sky forecast, then waging a war without endeavoring to pay for any portion of it, and finally lax regulation, which caught up with us in 2007, 2008. All those things conspired so that the surplus he received of $236 billion in 2001 converted to a deficit of $1.3 trillion when he left office in January 2009. That's where we have come under him. Now we need to go back and get on track. It's almost impossible to balance the budget against headwinds like we have in the economy today. But the first thing we've got to do is get the economy up and running, because you can only balance the budget if you're moving in the same direction as the economy. It's horrendous otherwise to accomplish it. We need to freeze in place discretionary spending, and we undertook to do that this year. We need to rein in defense spending. We need to enforce pay-go, something I've contributed, which says you can't enhance an entitlement, or you can't cut a tax if it has an adverse effect on the bottom line without offsetting it so that adverse effect is not realized. And finally, I think we've got to take steps to make sure that as the economy gets better, and it will, we make provision for the budget itself to get better at the same time, in the same step. For example, the Recovery Act will pay out this year. We should let it play out and not extend it. We have rescinded in the House Bank Regulation Bill TARP funds. There are other things, Medicaid, food stamps, unemployment insurance, FDIC guarantees. All of these things will shrink such that if we can keep the budget on that track, by 4 years to 5 years from now, we will cut the deficit in half. And that's one objective that I would like to try and see carried out.
Thank you.